This is not just another news story. This is a moment that will be remembered for generations. The headlines are flashing, the nation is on edge, and the world is watching as history unfolds before our eyes. It's a turning point in American history, a crossroads where law, culture, and identity collide. The very fabric of the nation is being tested, and the outcome will shape the future for millions of Americans. On January 15, 2026, the Supreme Court delivered a landmark 6-3 decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Inc. v. Rodriguez, fundamentally altering gun rights in America. The ruling sent shockwaves through the legal system as justices debated the meaning of the Second Amendment in the modern era. The ruling redefines the right to bear arms outside the home, impacting every American, regardless of where they live, work, or travel. Suddenly, the question of who can carry a firearm in public is no longer just a local issue. It's a national conversation. The world is watching as the U.S. sets a new precedent for gun rights. International leaders, legal scholars, and everyday citizens are all asking, what does this mean for America? And what message does it send to the rest of the world? For years, states varied widely, each with its own patchwork of laws, regulations, and requirements. Some states embraced broad access to firearms, while others imposed strict limits reflecting deep cultural and political divides. Some required permits for concealed carry, demanding background checks, training, and a lengthy approval process. For many, the process was daunting, expensive, and often out of reach. Others gave law enforcement broad discretion to deny them, allowing local officials to decide who was worthy of carrying a concealed weapon. This led to accusations of bias, inconsistency, and unfairness across state lines. The Supreme Court has now declared these discretionary systems unconstitutional, creating a new national standard. No longer can states or local authorities arbitrarily deny law-abiding citizens the right to carry a firearm for self-defense. For millions in states like California and New York, the path to carrying a concealed firearm is now dramatically easier. Lines are forming at government offices, and citizens are adjusting to a new reality where the right to carry is no longer the exception, but the rule. For others, the decision raises concerns about public safety and gun violence. Families worry about what this means for their neighborhoods, and communities debate how to balance individual rights with collective security. This is more than a legal change. It's a seismic cultural shift. Protests erupt in city streets, heated debates fill diners and living rooms, and headlines capture the nation's uncertainty and hope. The debate now centers on who can carry a gun, where, and what that means for society. Lawmakers, law enforcement, and citizens alike are grappling with new questions about safety, responsibility, and freedom. The story is just beginning and we'll guide you through every step. As America redefines itself, we'll be here to explore the consequences, the controversies, and the conversations that will shape the next chapter of our nation's history. To truly grasp the significance of today's ruling, we need to journey back through the complex and often turbulent history that led us here. The story of the Second Amendment and its interpretation is a long one, filled with shifting perspectives, heated debates, and landmark moments that have shaped the legal landscape of the United States. The Second Amendment, ratified in 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights, was for many years widely understood as being connected to the collective defense of the states, specifically, the maintenance of well-regulated militias. For generations, courts and lawmakers saw it as a provision rooted in the context of the 18th century, not as a guarantee of personal gun ownership. Throughout the 19th and much of the 20th century, the responsibility for regulating firearms was largely left to individual states and local governments. Cities and states enacted their own laws, reflecting the diverse attitudes and needs of their communities. Gun control was a patchwork, with little federal involvement. This began to change in the 20th century, as the nation faced new challenges. The National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1968 were passed in response to rising crime and high-profile assassinations, marking the first major federal interventions into gun regulation. These laws set new standards and restrictions, signaling a shift in the national conversation. Despite these changes, the dominant legal interpretation remained that the Second Amendment did not confer an unlimited individual right to bear arms. Most courts upheld restrictions, and the debate simmered quietly in academic circles and legal scholarship. But in the late 20th century, a powerful and organized gun rights movement emerged. Groups like the NRA began to push a new narrative, arguing passionately that the right to own firearms was a fundamental personal liberty, essential to American identity and freedom. This movement influenced politicians, legal scholars, and the public alike. The focus of the debate gradually shifted from the collective rights of militias to the individual rights of citizens, sparking new legal challenges and public discourse. By the dawn of the 21st century, the stage was set for a major confrontation at the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court was poised to address questions that had lingered for centuries, questions that would determine the future of gun rights in America. The nation found itself deeply divided. Lower courts issued conflicting rulings, and passionate advocates on both sides rallied outside courthouses, demanding clarity. The stakes were high, and the country waited anxiously for a definitive answer. The legal uncertainty was like a ticking clock, counting down to a moment that would reshape the law. Everyone knew that the right case was on the horizon, one that would force the Supreme Court to finally weigh in. With the battle lines drawn and anticipation building, the stage was set for a historic decision, one that would echo through the halls of justice and the fabric of American society. The modern Second Amendment era began in 2008 with District of Columbia versus Heller. The Supreme Court ruled for the first time that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm for self-defense at home. 2 years later, McDonald versus City of Chicago extended this right to the states, but the court left a crucial question unanswered. Does the right extend outside the home? Lower courts struggled, and states maintained a patchwork of laws. The court's composition shifted, and in 2022, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association vs. Bruen struck down New York's restrictive concealed carry law. The Bruen decision affirmed the right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. But states responded with new restrictions, setting the stage for the Rodriguez case. The legal earthquake was only beginning. Rodriguez was a direct response to states' attempts to sidestep Bruen. After Bruen, New York passed the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, banning guns in most public and private spaces and requiring good moral character. But gun rights groups argued this was malicious compliance, making public carry nearly impossible. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, sided with the plaintiffs. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that states can't declare nearly all public life a sensitive place to ban guns. The court established a new test. Only places with a historical tradition of gun bans can be restricted. The ruling invalidates similar laws in several states, forcing them to adopt a shall-issue model for permits. The landscape of concealed carry in America has been redrawn overnight. The right to carry is now the national standard. The impact was immediate and chaotic. Attorneys general in affected states scrambled to respond. Some vowed to fight, others conceded their laws were unenforceable. Gun stores saw surges in sales and permit applications, overwhelming administrative systems. Protests erupted in cities, with gun control advocates warning of increased violence, while gun rights supporters celebrated. Businesses and public spaces now face tough choices about allowing firearms. Public transit, universities, and workplaces are re-examining policies. Millions in urban areas are confronting the reality of more armed citizens in public. The national conversation on safety and rights has never been more urgent. The political fallout has been explosive. In Washington, the president condemned the ruling, urging Congress to act, while Republicans praised it as a victory for constitutional rights. The issue is now central to the 2026 midterm elections. In blue states, lawmakers are scrambling to draft new restrictions that might survive the court's new standard. Lawsuits are certain to follow, ensuring years of legal battles. Red states are moving to expand gun rights even further, some considering eliminating permits altogether. The nation is polarizing, with states digging in on both sides. The legal and political fight is far from over. The economic impact is massive. Firearms manufacturers and related industries are booming, with stock prices surging. Insurance companies are reassessing liability risks for businesses and property owners. Tourism and hospitality sectors worry about the effect on visitors, especially in major cities. State and local governments face new costs processing permit applications and training law enforcement. The financial burden on public services could rise if gun-related incidents increase. The economic ripples touch nearly every sector, from retail to public safety. The ruling's effects are being felt far beyond the courtroom. Experts are deeply divided on the Supreme Court's recent ruling, and the debate is more intense than ever. Across the country, legal scholars, public health officials, and criminologists are weighing in, each bringing their own perspective and concerns to the table. Professor David French, a leading voice in constitutional law, calls the ruling a logical extension of previous landmark cases like Heller and Bruin. He believes it strongly affirms the right to self-defense, not just at home, but also in public spaces, and sees it as a necessary protection of individual liberties. French argues that the history and tradition test, now central to Second Amendment cases, provides clear and principled limits to state power, ensuring that government cannot arbitrarily restrict fundamental rights. But not all experts agree. Professor Marianne Franks, who specializes in law and society, strongly disagrees with this approach. She calls the test unworkable and even dangerous, arguing that it ties modern law to outdated and sometimes discriminatory historical practices. Franks warns that the ruling effectively handcuffs states, making it much harder for them to address the urgent problem of gun violence in today's society. She fears it could undermine efforts to keep communities safe. Public health experts like Dr. Evelyn Reed echo these concerns. Reed predicts that states forced to loosen their carry laws will see higher rates of gun deaths and injuries, especially in urban areas already struggling with violence. She calls the ruling a public health crisis in the making, warning that the ripple effects could overwhelm hospitals and emergency services and put vulnerable populations at even greater risk. On the other side, criminologist Dr. John Lott offers a very different perspective. He argues that when law-abiding citizens are allowed to carry firearms, they can deter crime and make public spaces safer for everyone. Lott insists the decision empowers responsible citizens, not criminals, and points to studies suggesting that increased legal gun owners can actually reduce violent crime rates. The debate is fierce and ongoing, with both sides passionately citing data, history, and real-world outcomes to support their arguments. The evidence is complex, and consensus remains elusive. These divisions among experts mirror the nation's deep uncertainty and anxiety about the future of gun laws and public safety. As the country watches and waits, the true consequences of this ruling will unfold for years to come, shaping the legal and social landscape in ways we are only beginning to understand. The Supreme Court has spoken, but the debate is far from over. The Rodriguez decision marks a new chapter in America's gun debate, not an endpoint. States will draft new laws, courts will interpret them, and legal battles will continue. The divide is deep. One side sees a vital right, the other a public health crisis. Finding common ground is the challenge ahead. This moment calls for empathy, not just argument. Listen to those who disagree with you, understand their fears and hopes. Support responsible gun ownership and evidence-based violence reduction. The legal standard is set, but how we live together is up to us. Our shared future depends on honest conversation and understanding.